Macaroni and cheese, one of the greatest, most delicious things in the world. But many macaroni and cheeses are dry. The noodles are overcooked. Today we're gonna figure out how to make the most luscious, creamy, enjoyable baked mac and cheese that there is. This mac and cheese recipe had been building in me for years. I've been thinking about it and thinking about it. The key, I believe, is drastically undercooking your noodles, because when it goes in the oven and bakes, the noodles are gonna continue to cook, and sort of drastically over saucing your noodles as well. Taking into account that when the mac and cheese is in the oven, the sauce is gonna tighten up and the noodles are gonna continue cooking. I made this dish once for my family and knocked it out of the park. I was so happy with it. I thought it was creamy and delicious and wonderful, but I didn't record the quantities. Today on the video, I'm gonna try and recreate that experience, and then behind the scenes, I'm gonna go back and write down quantities and be more scientific, and I'm gonna publish the recipe so that by the time you're seeing this video, we're gonna have a trustworthy recipe on the Food 52 website. For baked macaroni and cheese, you got your pot to boil the pasta. Like I said, you're gonna drastically undercook the pasta here. Not just al dente, but undercooked. And then you have your other pot that has the bechamel sauce. We just made a video about bechamel sauce, go check that out. We're gonna use this tall pot for the Mornay sauce and mixing the noodles in the sauce. Then I'm gonna transfer it to a shallower, wider pot to go in the oven. It's one thing to have a philosophy and approach to macaroni and cheese, undercook the noodles, drown it in sauce, throw it in the oven. None of that matters if you haven't selected the right kind of cheese. You need generally softer, younger cheeses to grate and melt into your bechamel sauce to make a creamy, luscious Mornay sauce for your macaroni and cheese. If you select a cheese that is aged too long, it'll be drier, oilier, and you might have a grainy or gritty texture in your Mornay sauce. The other thing I'll avoid when it comes to a sauce like this are pulled curd cheeses like a mozzarella, because when they melt, they don't incorporate nicely into a sauce. They get sort of stringy and tangly. Some people might like that, but I'll reserve the mozzarella and I'll sprinkle it on top of the macaroni and cheese, so as it bakes, you get a nice crispy, bubbly crust on top. Before I reveal the cheeses that I chose for the mac and cheese, I'm gonna call my wife Elena, who's a cheese expert, and we'll see if she can guess the cheeses that I selected.
Hello.
Hey, you're on
Hello.
speakerphone and you're on a video.
Fabulous.
We're calling you from Food 52 with a mac and cheese question.
My favorite kind of question.
Yeah.
Especially from my husband.
Exactly, thank you. Calling Elena while I'm at work is one of my favorite things to do. So, we've made a bechamel sauce, and we're gonna grate some cheeses into the bechamel sauce to make sort of a creamy, luscious Mornay sauce, and that's the basis for our macaroni and cheese. I told the world that you want to avoid more aged, sort of oily, crumbly cheeses, that you're looking for something younger and fresher to melt into the sauce. And
yeah,
we want
moisture.
You want moisture, exactly. But I also said I avoid putting like pulled curd cheeses into the sauce because they can get stringy. Something like a fresh mozzarella, I'll put it on top but not in the sauce. I'm curious if you want to try and guess the cheeses that I chose to put in the mac and cheese. I have 3 cheeses in front of me.
3 cheeses.
Yeah.
Provolone.
That is one of them, 100%.
Wait, okay, question. Will all 3 cheeses go in at the same time?
Huh. Well, I was thinking to sort of add them one by one, but I didn't have a specific order that I was gonna add them.
Okay,
They're all
so you're
good.
not, like, one of them isn't a finishing cheese, is what I'm asking.
I'm gonna use mozzarella at the end sprinkled on top, but it's not gonna go in the sauce.
Okay.
So provolone is one, yeah.
Do you have like a Fontina type?
I have a young Fontina, that's the second one.
Okay.
Wow.
What is the 3rd cheese a pecorino of some kind?
It's not a pecorino. You're sort of close. It's in a similar ballpark. I wouldn't use like a pecorino romano though, because I worry that
Yeah.
would clump up.
No, definitely not, but
Yeah.
you could use a younger pecorino.
Right. That's true.
lesser known.
Well, this is
know.
similar to a young pecorino. I picked a young Asiago. Basically the same thing.
Yeah, same thing.
All right.
Except different milk type, not the same thing.
Right. So pecorino is sheep's milk and Asiago is cow.
Yep.
All right. My goal here was sort of like rich, almost like kid-friendly, sort of milky type of cheeses. I know the provolone has a little bit of a bite to it, but you think I'll achieve my goal here?
Totally. You're definitely going to achieve it. And the bite in the provolone is going to be mellowed out by everything else. So it'll be sort of a perfect level of intensity for children and grown-ups alike.
Cool. All right. This was fun. Thanks, Elena.
Bye.
Bye. Before I add the pasta, I'm gonna salt my water. It should taste like the ocean, nice and salty. For baked mac and cheese, I selected this sort of tube-shaped pasta. Just choose whatever shape makes you happy. It doesn't really matter. I think tubes are nice because the sauce can fill inside the hole and you really enjoy the creaminess of it all. I wouldn't use like a straight long noodle like a spaghetti or anything. I would use something tubular in shape, but choose whatever you want. When I grate the cheese, I'm not gonna use the largest hole on the box grater. I wanna use something a little bit smaller, finer, so that the cheese can melt more easily into the bechamel sauce. The bechamel I have on a low heat. We wanna gently melt the cheese. You don't want that sauce simmering at all. If you cook cheese in a simmering sauce, it can clump and have an odd texture. I'm also not gonna add it all at once. I'm gonna add it little by little and continue to stir to ensure that the sauce is uniform and creamy. I set the timer for 6 minutes. We'll let that cook. Now for the important part, making the Mornay sauce. This bechamel, it's a little bit looser than a typical bechamel because the cheese is gonna thicken the sauce. I'm gonna add my cheese a little bit at a time and stir it in, add a little more cheese and stir it in. I don't wanna add too much cheese at once. I want it to melt gently and slowly. This cheese should incorporate seamlessly into the sauce. You shouldn't be able to see strands or clumps at all. It should just look like a thick, creamy sauce. I'm pretty happy with this texture right now. You can't see any clumps of cheese. It's a nice uniform sauce, but it's very thick and stringy and creamy. This is just what you want. The original bechamel sauce here wasn't too salty because the cheese we're adding to the sauce will bump up that salt level to right where we want it to be. I'm gonna taste just to make sure. It's good. I'm on the fence about whether I want to add an extra pinch of salt to this or not. I think I'm happy with it the way it is. I'm not going to add any more salt. The pasta cooked in the salted water should bring its own flavor. I have about a minute until the pasta is ready. The sauce is ready. It's important to hold the sauce at a nice low temperature. Now that the sauce is perfectly emulsified and creamy, if for some reason it got too hot, the sauce could break, the cheese could clump up. It's really important to keep the temperature steady and very low. I really like what I'm seeing here. Drastically undercooked pasta. It looks like it's swimming in sauce. It's more sauce than you think it'll need. But when we transfer this to the baking dish and it goes in the oven, by the time we take it out, the noodles will be perfectly cooked, not overcooked, and the sauce should tighten up so it's just the right amount of creaminess, not an excessive amount. I'm really happy with how this is looking right now. The oven has been preheating. It's at 450. We're gonna transfer this mess into the baking dish. I'm gonna top it with fresh mozzarella so the mozzarella is gonna get all crispy on top. Cook it for about 20-25 minutes. Give it a chance for the sauce to condense, the noodles to finish cooking, and the top to caramelize. While that baked mac and cheese is in the oven, I want to show another sort of quick and easy stovetop mac and cheese that you can do in your sleep, I want to say. It's good for weeknights. It's good when you don't want to go through the whole production of a baked mac and cheese. It's almost like a cacio e pepe, but without the pepper. Just a simple, creamy stovetop mac and cheese. So what I'm going to do is really simple. Salt the pasta water, cook my pasta. I chose these little mini shells because that reminds me of the mac and cheese of my youth. I'll undercook this pasta by about a minute so it's nice and al dente. I chose for the stovetop mac and cheese, this is actually a goat's cheese called Drunken Goat. It's nice and mild, it's a little bit sweet. I chose it because I was in the mood to have it. Any young, semi-firm cheese will work great with this recipe. I'm sort of winging it without a recipe right now, but by the time you're watching this, the recipe for this will be on the Food 52 website. These are cooked noodles. That's a little bit of butter, about 2 tablespoons. This is about half a cup of pasta water. I'm gonna wait until the butter is totally melted and mixed in with that pasta water. Then off heat, I'm gonna add the cheese. It's important that the pasta is really, really hot so that it melts the cheese, but I don't want it to be directly over the heat because the cheese will clump. Very hot noodles, not over the direct heat. Add my cheese. And you have to stir a lot really fast. What I like about this technique is you're not getting too many strands of pulley melty cheese. The cheese is incorporating in with the butter and pasta water. You're sort of replicating boxed mac and cheese, but without any of the box ingredients. You're just using your own pasta, pasta water, butter, and whichever cheese you want. This is very hot right now, so the sauce is still a little bit loose, but as it cools, it should have the perfect consistency. So I love the way the stovetop mac and cheese is looking right now. It reminds me so much of my childhood mac and cheese. Just a thin layer of creamy sauce coating the outside. Nothing extravagant, just really simple comfort food. One of my favorite things is to have basically as big of a spoon as possible when you're eating your tiny shells. This works especially well when you're sort of home alone, no one's around. Just shoveling as much mac and cheese in your face as possible, basically. So good. When this went into the oven, those noodles were like dangerously undercooked. I cooked them for only 6 minutes out of 12, and the sauce was vast. The noodles were swimming in all that sauce. Now that it's out of the oven, the sauce is nice and tight, and I'm expecting that the noodles will be sort of perfectly al dente. I'll take a bite and we'll see. Nice and cheesy, creamy, not too dry. The noodles are not overcooked. They're pretty soft, to be honest. I probably could have undercooked it by even another minute or two, which is interesting. Each brand of noodle is going to be different, so you have to sort of get a feel for it. But overall, I'm very happy with how this came out. Those 3 cheeses that we selected to go into the Mornay sauce are working really nicely together. There's a good salinity to it. And then the mozzarella on top did just what we were hoping it would do. It got nice and bubbly and brown, give a little texture to the top of the mac and cheese. I had a lot of fun today. I love pasta, I love cheese, so this was a great episode for me. If you had fun, click like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.